Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Security Series from Security Operations and Services. I'm Paul Klechka. I am a security analyst at SOS, which is a nice way of saying I do a little bit of everything in the office, but mainly I'm on what's called the incident response team, which means if we have some sort of IT security incident, I'm on the team that's responsible for figuring out what happened and how we can make that better in the future so it hopefully doesn't happen again. So today, my presentation is about IT security in plain English because I have been to a couple of these security series now and they do tend to kind of wind up going for those higher level IT folks and that kind of means we tend to leave out folks who are actually using the systems that we're supposed to be keeping secure. And it's just as important that you guys know about IT security as us because you're the ones with all the data. So, this is a very general overview of things. I'm not going to get into a lot of depth because there is a lot to cover and I want to make sure that we have time for questions and answers at the end. So, to start out, remember the good old days when you had your computer and the great thing was you could avoid getting a virus just by not looking at porn. That was basically the advice. Don't look at porn, you won't get a virus. It was simple, it was doable, and for the most part it worked. Keep it clean, you'll be all right. Now, the sad thing is, if you remember that advice, that is now as old as this year's incoming freshman. And things have changed a lot in that amount of time. So let's start about talking about the threats that are out there for the university in terms of IT. So the computers that we use for work are connected to the Penn State network. And you can kind of think of the Penn State network as an old medieval castle. You know, it's got big walls that are made of heavy stone, and of course you've got a moat around it, because you have to have a moat around the castle. So now imagine that every day there are millions of arrows being shot at the walls and into the moat around that castle. There are literally millions of attacks on the Penn State network every day. And most of them are automated, and kind of like an arrow hitting a solid stone wall, they don't really do much because the defense is strong, simple, and well maintained. But those attacks continue in the hope that at some point, maybe we'll leave a hole in the wall somewhere. Never mind the holes in those walls, that's not really the network. There's a hope that there will be a hole in the wall somewhere, or we'll accidentally let down the drawbridge. Probably not going to happen, but hey, why not let the automated things try and see if it actually happens? So those attacks are really easy to defend against as long as we, the IT people who are responsible for maintaining the outer defenses, don't get lazy or do something dumb. So that's where I'll stop with the castle comparison because it kind of didn't work after this, but I also don't want to bore you with castles. But in essence, we can easily block a lot of the attacks that are coming in because they originate outside of Penn State and they don't have an easy way into our systems. But of course we can't just block everything. We need to share things with the world because we're a university and we have knowledge to spread, we have websites we want people to see, we want to receive email and we want to be able to check it from anywhere. And of course we have world campus students who need to get to their course content and every other student who lives off campus who also wants to get to their course content. So we open up some specific things to the outside world. And that's okay. But those things that we do open up to the outside world, just like everything else, are imperfect. They have flaws. And despite the best intentions of the people who made them, there are folks out there trying to find those flaws. And there's a lot of money to be made in finding them. Some people find the flaws and fix them, and that's how they make their money. Other people, not so much. They find the flaws, figure out how to exploit them for more gain. And when that second group of people finds a particular flaw first, that's where there's potential for a lot of trouble. So far I've talked about things that are directed in at our network from the outside. Then what about the other way around? Because there is a whole internet out there to explore, and there are a lot of people here at Penn State who want to explore it. Research it, find things out. And that's where the fun and the trouble really get going, because if you are at your desk on your computer and you're browsing the web, it isn't just you sending requests out to see things. You're actually creating a connection with another computer somewhere out on the web, and that line of communication is open and things flow back and forth. And we aren't going to block that because you've originated it. You've said this is okay, so we're allowing you to have that communication. So that data is flowing back and forth, and that's when these flaws become really dangerous. Because if, say, the operating system that you have running on your computer isn't fully patched with all of the latest security fixes, or the programs that you run on your computer isn't patched with all of the fixes for it, or the plugins that you use in your browser aren't all up to date, there's a problem, because if there is a patch out there available, every single bad guy knows that the patch is available and knows what the exploit is and what they can do to really get something of value from that exploit. So if you don't have the patch in place, it's a known way of getting into your system. But you're thinking, well, but I've got Symantec installed on my machine. I'm safe. This is where I have really bad news, because programs like Symantec or McAfee really only catch between 20 to 30% of what's out there. That does not mean you shouldn't have it on your computer. It is a good defense. But there are a lot of threats out there on the internet that are going to be able to bypass your antivirus software completely. And it is really bad stuff, and that's why today we call it malware, because it isn't necessarily a virus that goes from one computer to the next, trying to just spread itself around. It may be something coming from a single point and going out, and that thing might be a keylogger that is recording every key that you type and looking for when you're entering a password into a website, so it can record that and save it and give it to someone else. It could be a data stealer that gets into your computer and starts scanning it for social security numbers, bank account numbers, credit card numbers, other things of value that it could send back to identity thieves. So a question that we get a lot in SOS is, who does this and why? And there is a very popular perception of the teenager living in their parents' basement hacking for fun. And it isn't that those folks aren't out there. They are. But whereas hacking kind of used to be a fun thing to do, and it was sort of a hobby, now it's become a very organized operation, sometimes even as in organized crime. And one of the big groups there is the Russian mob, or as they prefer to be called, the Russian business network. Because, just admitting you're the mob doesn't really work. You also have government-sponsored hackers. And we see a lot of this coming from places like China, where they're trying to get information on research that's being done. And that's where there's a real threat to Penn State, because we are doing a lot of research here. It may not be classified, but one day it might turn into a classified project. And of course, we do have units that do work on classified things. So they're trying to get into them as well. But of course, the real reason why these people are doing these things, with the possible exception of the state-sponsored stuff, is money. There's a lot of money to be had in compromising your computer, your account, because there's a lot of information there that can be sold, and a lot of money to be made off of that. So far I've talked about the flaws that are in the systems that you're using that can be exploited, but there is something that is usually a lot easier to crack, and it also yields a much bigger payoff when it is cracked, and that is you. An example here is phishing. So for those of you in the audience, are you familiar with phishing scams? Okay. So I didn't have to look very far through security traffic to find a couple of them. So I've put a couple up here. And these are pretty obvious phishing scams. You've probably seen a lot of these in your inboxes here at work. They generally come in and they tell you that something is going on with your account. This first one says your account needs to be verified, so click here to verify it. Or here, this one's always good. You've reached the quota. You can't possibly get any more email, so click here and we'll upgrade it. And of course, when you click these links, you're generally taken to a page that asks you to log in. Sometimes, these folks are very good at doing this, and they will create a page that looks just like the Penn State web access page with the thumbprint. Then you put your user ID and your password in there. And it doesn't take you anywhere. It just sends those things right back to the hackers, and they have your user ID and password. Now, that's pretty problematic, because think about your Penn State account for a minute, and think about what you, just you, can get into with that account. And here's the audience participation part, because tell me what you can get into with your Penn State account. Server space. Okay, server space with just your password. Okay, what else? ESIC, which means you can get into what? What's in ESIC? Direct deposit. So if I'm a really bad guy and I get your password, I could go into ESIC and I could say, I wonder how much money they make. Well, I could look that up. And I could say, wow, they make a lot of money. They make a lot more money than I do. So I could just change your direct deposit information to my bank account. You might see it in your email, but because I've got your password, I can access your email too. So maybe I could sit there and watch your email for the message to come through and then delete it so you wouldn't see it. A lot of stuff there just with that Penn State account. So hopefully, having said that, perhaps you're sitting here thinking, maybe I should set a better password on my Penn State account because it's kind of simple right now. Hopefully not. Hopefully you have a really great, super strong password on your Penn State account that's longer than the bare minimum, and no one's going to be able to guess it. If not, think about that when you get back to your office. So another way that these folks will try to trick you into doing something that will either turn over information about you or someone else are sort of these fantastical offers or stories. And a lot of these come through social media, and I've used a couple from Facebook here that we have seen some problems with in the past. So we've got this first one here that is just absolutely horrible. You know, click the like button. First of all, you're clicking like on this. That's a little bad. But it's a horrific wall post that made this poor girl commit suicide on Christmas Eve. What a horrible human tragedy. And you're going to hit like on it because you just can't resist it. And hopefully you guys here wouldn't do that. But trust me, people do. People are really into that stuff and they will click like. And when they do, they might be asked to install an app on Facebook so they can view the news story. It's not really a news application. It's something that then comes into the computer, and it doesn't even need to exploit a flaw because you've just given it permission to do whatever it wants. And it goes in, it can go into your Facebook account, other things in your browser, pull information, depending upon what all they decide to send in that download. And then we've got the other one here, the $100 Starbucks gift card for free. And of course there you're like, oh wow, you know, that might take care of my coffee needs for the rest of the week. So yeah, I want that. So again, it asks you to install an app so you can, you know, get the information for your card, but again, not really doing what it promised. It gets into your machine, starts stealing data, sending information back to folks that you really don't want to have it. So talking about some of that data, who here recognizes my little blue friend? It is, yes, okay. So who here uses Identity Finder? Raise your hand. Okay, yay! I don't have to scold anyone. Who loves Identity Finder? Raise your hand. Who really hates using Identity Finder? Okay, I know that it is not fun to use. But Identity Finder is used to find PII. And who can tell me what PII stands for? Thank you. So personally identifiable information, which means, in a legal sense for Penn State, things like social security numbers, bank account numbers, credit card numbers, driver's license numbers. Things that if someone has that and perhaps one other piece of information about the person it belongs to, they could steal that person's identity or a financial account. In the case of a social security number, it's simply that number and a name. You have enough information right there to go out and apply for credit, a loan, all sorts of things. If it's a credit card number and a name, there are some places that don't require that little 3-digit code on the back of your card to call up and order something. So, hey, Home Shopping Network. Yeah, it's me, Bob. I want to order 5 Nordic tracks. So, while I will readily admit that Identity Finder can be a huge pain, it pops up on my machine every other Wednesday, and it always finds a lot of false positives. It is an incredibly important tool that we have here at Penn State to help find information on computers that should not be there, because really we shouldn't be storing any of that information on our computers. And in fact, how many of you have actually had Identity Finder find some PII on your machine? Yeah. It was mine, so it would have been my own stupid fault had I lost that, but I was really glad it found it so I could get it off of there. I'd been traveling for the university, had my purchasing card number on a form, and I forgot to delete the form off my machine. So, it is very helpful. Hopefully you will have perhaps a renewed appreciation of Identity Finder the next time it pops up on your machine, because it is not that difficult, as I've said, for folks to exploit things on your computer and be able to get at that data. Kind of in the same vein as PII, do any of you process credit card payments coming to the university? You do, okay. Have you done that for a while? Oh, 6 months, okay. Because that process changed a lot over, say, the last 5 years, and that's why I was asking how long you've done it. But so when you have someone wanting to make a payment to the university using a credit card, how does that usually come in?
Well, actually, just through e-commerce.
Okay. So you don't have, say, someone faxing in a registration form or something with a card number on it?
No.
No.
All I get is an email with
Okay, but that's a really important thing to note, is that partially obscured. Because when we're talking about systems that we're all using every day, because we don't want that PII on there, any report coming from a system that does process those transactions. And I'm guessing, well, are you working directly with e-commerce, or you're just sending stuff to it? Okay, so that e-commerce system is locked down, and all it does is process credit card transactions, because you don't want anything else happening on that machine. And in fact, PCI, the Purchasing Card Industry, which is what PCI stands for, they don't want anything else happening on that machine either, because if someone's browsing the web with that computer that's processing the card numbers, it becomes really easy to get them. So PCI, a slightly different thing than the whole PII initiative, but very important to the university, because should the university take in payments like that and lose any of those credit card numbers with other identifying data, the university would be liable for the damages. So we have to be very, very careful about that. Okay, so I don't want to make it all sound doom and gloom. It does kind of seem that way at times, but I promise it's not. And so the question becomes, what can you do? What can you individually do? You know, we are here, we're looking out for these systems, and we're doing everything we can to make them safe, but as I've said, it's very easy for someone to get in, and I will even admit it has happened to me. I got taken in by a phishing scam on my Facebook account. It was 5 o'clock one night, I wanted to get out, I'd been doing things, email popped up, I was like, followed the link, changed my password, and went, wait a minute. Oh! So it can happen to people, it does happen to people, and especially if they want to target someone, they can really tailor information to trick you into falling for their scams. But there are things you can do. So the first thing that I highly recommend to people, don't use your Penn State account for your own personal business. And by that I don't mean like a commercial enterprise you have going on the side. That you definitely don't want to do that. But I'm just talking about everyday emails. If your mom is sending you email at your Penn State address, or your kids are sending you email at your Penn State address, it's just not a great idea. And in fact, it isn't just a good idea to not do this, it's policy. 80/20, which we all signed when we got our Access account, says that we will use these systems for Penn State business only. Now, realistically, we know that doesn't happen. People get a hold of our addresses because they are publicly available, and then they send us personal things. If someone's trying to contact me and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to talk to them, a lot of times they'll send stuff to my Penn State account because they know it's going to get my attention. So it does happen, and we recognize that. But the more you put your Penn State email address out there for people to use, the more people who have it, the more people whose computer gets compromised, then that information is out there, and you have more spammers sending you more junk mail, and more of an opportunity for them to catch you in some sort of phishing scam or something of that nature. So, and then also, this goes for accounts. Like, you have to use an email address on Facebook. Don't use your Penn State address. Use one of the services that's out there that will give you a free address, and then get all of your Facebook mail at that address instead of your Penn State one. Because then, when that Facebook scam comes in through your Penn State address, you know it's fake because you've got it all through your personal address at home. Kind of along the same lines with that, make sure that you never, ever share your password to your Penn State account, or frankly, any of your accounts, with anyone else, ever. With your Penn State account, especially IT staff. And it isn't because we aren't trustworthy, it's because if you tell us your password, it is then incumbent upon us to make sure that you go and change your password because we know it now. And that is a personal and professional liability for us, but it's just not a good thing for you. We talked about all the things that you can get to with your Penn State account. Even if you trust your spouse or significant other, sometimes relationships go bad. Sometimes someone thinks that a really funny practical joke would be going in and messing with your account, and it's not. And these things do happen. We do actually see more in the student population where there is a nasty breakup between two people and an ex goes in and starts messing with an account. Maybe they unenroll someone from classes. That's always fun. So never, ever share your password with anyone. Even if you're having trouble with your account, your IT administrators, if it's your central Penn State account, we can help you out without your password. If it's a local account, those IT administrators can help you there as well without your password. So if you do get one of those emails saying there's a problem with your account and it looks really official, and you're like, oh, maybe there is a problem with my account. But it has that link in there and it tells you to follow it to take care of the problem. Don't follow the link. If it's your central Penn State account, this is the website where you can administer your own account, www.work.psu.edu. You go straight there, and log in, then you know everything is working fine with your account in terms of being able to authenticate. It'll give you information about your passspace, when your password expires. But the big thing is, if you can log in here, your account is likely okay. If you still suspect that there's something wrong, contact the accounts office, because they can look into things further and tell you if there is actually a problem. But the big takeaway here is we don't really send email messages to someone who's having a problem with their account. Because if you're having a problem with your account, you probably can't read your email. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where you have to actually experience the problem and report it before something can get done. So seeing an email telling you about problems with your account, be very, very wary of those things. And this is one that isn't quite as obvious, but who here is on UCS for their email? Okay. Who is on a departmental system? Your department has its own web server, or your own email server, sorry, okay. Hopefully, for those folks using the departmental mail server, there is a web interface for that isn't too bad. It's probably an Exchange server, so you can use Outlook Web Access. That's a really nice system, and it's good to use. If you're using UCS, we have the web client. And I recommend that you use your web client rather than putting, say, Outlook or Thunderbird, or God forbid, Eudora, which has not been an email program for anyone to use for several years now. Don't put one of those clients on your machine, because it's going to go to the mail server and try to download all of your email to your computer. And we do find that in a lot of cases, the information that folks are after is coming to us in email, even though you tell people not to. If you are running some sort of program where people have to register and pay, someone's going to send you a credit card number via email. No matter how much you yell at them, it will happen. Someone may say, hey, I'm trying to get into this thing. Here's my password. I've had this happen. Someone sends me their password via email. Aside from the fact that that's just a really bad idea altogether, if you're bringing all of those things into your computer and storing them locally, that's just another set of things for bad guys to go after on your machine. Whereas if you're using the web client, you're getting a very temporary message that you're looking at there, and it goes away after you're done. It remains on the server, and the mail servers really are quite well protected as far as mail servers can be. But don't have those things just sitting on your computer. One of my personal favorites, second factor authentication. So, does anyone have one of these with them? I actually have both of those with me. Does anyone use one of these little things? Yeah, okay. No. No. Do you have it on you right now? Good man, okay. Because a lot of times I walk through an office and I see one of these things taped to the monitor. Now, second factor authentication is there to provide two means that you have to use in order to log into a system. With these little things, they generate numbers, and you go to log into a system, you put in your password, or perhaps you put in this number first. But you have to have both of those things to get into the system. And with second factor, it's usually something you have or something you are. So it could be, say, a fingerprint. I had one of those laptops where you had to slide your finger on it. And you had that and a password, and that was how you got into the machine. But it's two things before you can actually get into a system or service. And you want to have that because this eliminates the problem of someone getting your password and getting all of your stuff. If they don't have this second piece of information, they just can't do it. And the good news is, here at Penn State, we are looking at starting second factor authentication on access accounts. Yay. And it really is not a big deal, because hopefully what we'll be able to do with our second factor authentication is have you go and probably have a smartphone. If you don't, we do have ways around that. But if you have a smartphone, you can go download an application for your phone. And when you go and log in with your Penn State password on a system, it'll pop up a thing on your phone saying, hey, are you trying to log into email? Yes, I am. So you hit a yes button and you're in. If it pops up on your phone and you're nowhere near a computer trying to log into something and you hit no, then it's going to alert people that someone's trying to get into systems as you, but they don't have all of your information. So obviously they're not you and something needs to be done. So hopefully there will be more coming out about second factor authentication in your Penn State Access account this fall. Be on the lookout for that. If for some reason it is an opt-in service, I highly recommend that you opt into it, because with that second factor, you have pretty much taken care of the phishing problem on your account. It doesn't mean just willy-nilly click links and put your information everywhere, but it's going to make it a lot more difficult for someone to get into your account.
Do you have to do it every time you log in? Or do they run it like Google, where once you log into a station, then that's a,
You know, I am not in on the talks on this, so I don't know what the different iterations are. I imagine that there will be options like with Google where you can say this is a trusted system. I don't need to put it in every time. Or you can say, save that information for 30 days, and 30 days later, or a week later, or whatever, you have to do the second factor again. Because it can be a bit of a drag. I was using Google second factor authentication kind of early on, where they sent a text message to my phone and they wanted to do it every single time, and I was getting texts all the time trying to get into my Google stuff, and that was really not fun. But they refined that so you could have it persist for a period of time, and it didn't make it so difficult to get into things. So second factor is wonderful. However, there are still many, 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 many things out there that require you to have a password, and that's the only thing that you have protecting your account. And that gets to be a real pain the more accounts you have, because there's a really big temptation to just use the same password over and over again so you can remember it. And you don't want to do that, because if you're using the same password everywhere, they only have to get it once, and then they can get into everything. So there are products out there called password safes. Personally, I use LastPass. Some of my colleagues use 1Password. This does not mean that Penn State or I am telling you to use either of those products specifically. These are just two that I'm aware of and know to be pretty trustworthy. And in fact, on LastPass, I use second factor authentication. So before I can get to my passwords, I have to use a master password that I've set for my password safe and a second factor piece that comes up on my phone before it will release my passwords to the various sites that I'm visiting. It also has a secure password generator, because when you're setting your password, it's a really good idea to max the length out if you can. And because this thing remembers your passwords and you don't have to, set it as long as you want. Set it as long as you can, because the longer it is, typically the longer it would take for someone to actually crack it, figure out what it is. Doesn't mean that it's completely impossible, but it certainly slows folks down. And if you can add that additional security, it's a very good idea to do it. I could probably spend an entire hour talking about how to use these things, but they are pretty simple. So if you can remember those two addresses and check those out, setting those up is not difficult at all. But I do really recommend them. But something that will save you on a daily basis from a lot of things, mostly insanity, is this nice little plugin called Adblock Plus. And it does just what the name implies. It blocks ads. Where I find this to be most noticeable, is on Facebook and Google. Those ads just don't show up when you use this. That is not only good because you don't really want to look at ads, but one of the incredibly tricky ways that folks manage to get malware onto computers is, let's say, someone in the Russian business network has a front company, and they use that front company to purchase ad space on a perfectly legitimate website. It could be Consumer Reports, it could be Time, it could be Sports Illustrated. And I use those specific three because it's happened with them before. They buy ad space on one of these websites, and they create a, normal looking ad, but it's designed to install malware on computers. And you, the unsuspecting user, goes and visits one of these perfectly legitimate websites, and you don't have to click on the ad at all. Just by nature of it being on the page, it attempts to start installing this malware onto your machine. And if one of those many flaws happens to be existent on your machine that they're trying to exploit, you're in trouble and your machine is compromised. So, again, very good for saving you from those attacks, but also not having to look at ads. Because I know especially the Facebook ads are just, I know they have a system for determining what ads you see. I must be a very morbid person because they're very strange ads I get. But then, again, back to the patching. This is something you really want to pay attention to. And in fact, it would be a good idea if you aren't completely aware of how this happens on your machine to talk with your local IT folks and find out if, when they apply patches to the computers in your department, if it's just the operating system and other software made by that same manufacturer. So if it's a Windows machine, is it just patching Windows and, say, Microsoft Office and other Microsoft products? Or are they also updating things like Adobe Flash, Adobe Reader? Those are two that get exploited a lot. Java is another one that gets exploited a lot. If they aren't patching those things for you, then you need to make sure you are. And this gets us into somewhat of a tricky area because there is something called least privileged mode. And what that means is there are different types of accounts on computers. Some of those accounts are allowed to install things. Other accounts aren't. Now, it's a really good idea to run your computer every day with one of those accounts that can't install anything. It's just, again, another layer of security so something can't just automatically be installed. It doesn't always work, but it is good to do it that way. But if you don't have an administrator account on your computer and your IT guys aren't patching it, you can't patch it either. You've got to wait for them to come and do it. And so that's where you need to have a pretty serious discussion with them. It is not the end of the world. I may get things thrown at me by IT people for this. It is not the end of the world if you have administrative control over your machine. But like I said, you really don't want to run with that administrator account all the time. In fact, you really don't want to run with it at all. You want to run with that account that does not allow you to install things. And then when you do need to patch something, or you do need to install something, you make sure you really need to install it. It'll pop up and ask for the user ID and password for that administrator account. It just helps to keep it safe, helps to keep your machine safe and patched. And so with that, I've gone way over what I had intended, the amount of time I'd intended to talk. But since there are just a few of us here, leads us to time for question and answers. And hopefully you brought some issues with you that you faced in your everyday work where something about security has either frustrated you or you just didn't understand what was going on, and hopefully we can help you out. So, turn it over to you folks and the folks in Adobe Connect land.
You mentioned your Facebook account got hacked, or sort of got hacked. What did you have to do to change? Just change your password to fix that, or?
Yeah, so typically, when someone gains access to your account, they're either going to change the password so you just can't get to it at all, or they want to do something with it in the background so you don't really notice. So in my case, because I realized right away what I had done, I just closed my browser, opened it back up, typed in www.facebook.com, went, logged in with my old password because I hadn't really changed my password, but then did change the password knowing that I was actually on the Facebook site. Done. Because they had my old password, they could no longer get in. Of course, now Facebook, Twitter, and a lot of other folks are moving toward second-factor authentication. So that's a good thing to look into and put on some of those accounts, especially if you're maintaining, say, a Facebook page for a department here at Penn State. Very good idea. Other questions?
I was going to mention when I get any kind of email that has weird grammar in it, that's always a tip-off. And a lot of times all you have to do is hover your cursor over the link, and you can see the link is different from what it says on the typed-in link, and so a lot of times that's a dead giveaway.
Yeah, that is. So I've gone back here to the phishing slide, and yeah, if you get one of these, some email clients, if you hover over that link, it will actually pop it up and show you what it's going to go to. And if it's not going to a Penn State address, it's pretty clear that you're not going to fix your Penn State account by going to it. Also, you mentioned grammar. That is usually a pretty good tip-off. However, I will say that I'm one of the people who occasionally writes messages that go out, and sometimes I kind of slip on grammar. Not as bad as folks who maybe aren't native English speakers, who are probably writing these from the Russian Business Network, but it does happen. So grammar isn't always a completely dead giveaway, but it is a little hard to see these in here. Don't know about on Connect. If you look at the from address, it says admin, but then it's got this weird address after it that I don't think has Penn State in it anywhere. This one is actually from a university in Alaska, it would appear. But again, no Penn State in that address. It's actually very easy to spoof an email address. So when I see phishing scams where they don't have it, where they don't make it look like it's come from a Penn State account, I'm like, oh, really? You're not even trying. But it is. It's a dead giveaway. So yeah, watch out for that as well.
If we get one of these in our email account, I actually had one that had Penn State Access page. It was very convincing.
Yeah.
Should we send it to our IT guys, or what should we do with it?
You can send it to your local IT guys. If it has that Penn State web access page that looks very real, you can actually just send it straight to us. And the last slide I have here has our address on it, but it's security@psu.edu. We really do want to know, especially about the ones that are very convincing and looking like Penn State, because we want to try to get those shut down as quickly as possible, because those are the ones that really get people and get them to hand over their passwords, and then we wind up with a lot of compromised accounts. So yeah, you can report those directly to us. If it's something like these that I've put up here as examples, probably not. Most people aren't falling for these, and in most cases, it's they're going to a website where the administrators aren't responding to taking it down because they know what's going on there. These typically have been, those sites are established and they've been going on for a while. Where the ones with the Penn State Web Access, they tend to move around a lot because they know we're trying to get them. So when we can find one, the faster we can get to it and take it down, the better.
So you can actually click on one to see. I've never even clicked. I've been sort of too scared to even click on one just to see what's on the other side.
Yeah, sometimes the sites that you are taken to, and I am pretty sure that I've seen this happen with students where they had their browser, not a password safe, but their browser saving their passwords for them, and it was convincing enough that the browser filled in their user ID and password on the fake site. So if it's a Google form, which they do a lot of times, it doesn't actually have to be submitted. They get it like that without pushing a button. And so that is problematic. So it isn't a good idea to actually click on these and look at them. You might want to leave that for your IT folks. Is anyone still awake in Adobe Connect land? Out there? No questions though? Ooh. Thank you folks, good night. Okay. Okay, well let me go here to my last slide because it does have contact information for us. We do have a website. We are working on making a new website. It will be beautiful, I promise. But that's sos.its.psu.edu. Again, our email address, security@psu.edu, and our phone number is there. We are on Twitter and Facebook, and a lot of good information goes up there. So I do recommend that if you are on Twitter or Facebook, that you follow us. Not just so we get better numbers, but because there is good information there. We also did bring some resources here from a place called SANS. These are newsletters about IT security. They're actually quite good. We also post links to these on our website when new ones come out. But that website is a place where we do post resources, good resources when we find them, information about different services that we offer there, different events that we might be hosting, things like that. So do check that out every once in a while. If there aren't any more questions, we'll... Oh. Jen? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming today, and hope to see you at the next Security Series presentation. I would try turning on the lights, but that might do a screen or something, and I'm not going to touch it. Lights what?